So now in the next part, I will discuss about the C# interview question, and let's start on that. So the next question we can say we have like where is the version information store of an assembly, and I can say version information is stored in assembly inside the manifest. And again, I told like in the last video what is the manifest. So please watch it if you don't know about the manifest. Please watch in the previous video. Second question we have is versioning is applicable to private assembly? Yes, it is versioning applicable to private assembly also. And you heard about the like strong names. The most of the interviewer asking like what is the use of strong names. So when we talk about the like dotted application, it has a two part. One is the class library or the DLL I can say, and other is consumer like Windows UI. So using this DLL, and if the consumer identify the DLL library by the namespace and class name, it's called a weak reference. And if it is very much possible in deployment environment, someone can delete this original class library and fake a similar class library with the same class name and namespace name. So strong name is a unique name which is produced by the combination of version number and culture information, public key and digital signature. So no one can fake this identity or generate the same name. So that why we are like asking what is strong name, and using that we can say we have a like identity, and no one can be generate similar like that or fake I can say. So you can say your consumer or UI will refer to the class library with strong name rather than the class and namespace name. So in order to create the strong name, right click on the I can say I already taken a screenshot. So you have to just clicking on the right click on the class library, click on the properties and click on signing tab and click the new menu to generate the strong name. So as I can see, you just click on this and sign the assembly. So you just generate this strong name. The next question is coming like what is a delay signing? So the whole point about the strong name is to ensure that the client UI external component, so who is consuming this DLL knows that that DLL was published from the valid source. So this authenticity is verified by using the strong name. Strong name protection is good for the external hacker, but what if you have own developer think of doing something mischievous? So that's where delay signing help. The strong name key has two key, public key and private key. So you only share this public key with your developers so that they can work seamlessly. The private key is stored in the secure location, and when the DLL is about to deploy on production, the key is injected for the further security. So that's why the delay signing is using. And next question we have a what is a GAC? GAC is like global assembly cache and where all the shared .NET assembly reside. And GAC is used in the following situation like if the application has to be shared among the server application which is the same computer, and if the assembly has same special security requirement like only admin can remove the assembly. So if the assembly is private, then a simple delete of assembly and assembly file will be the remove the assembly. I can say in the normal words, it is like I can say in a single word is like security purpose we are using for the assembly. And how we can add and remove the assembly from the GAC. So you can use this GAC util tool which can come with the Visual Studio. So to register an assembly to GAC, go to the Visual Studio command prompt and type this GACUTIL hyphen I assembly name, and where assembly name is the like DLL name of the project. Once you have installed this assembly in the DLL, you can see this directory where you install C Windows assembly, and there's a folder where you install on that. Go in that folder, and when we have a mini DLL to be deployed, we need to create a setup and deployment package using this Windows installer. So the common way of deploying this GAG DLL is the production by using this Windows installer. So right now, like we are having installer, so click on that and you can modify or update your which thing you are needed. So this thing comes under that. Next question, if they are asking like if we have a two version of the same assembly in GAG, how do we make a choice? So on that we can say like when we have a two version of the same assembly in GAG, we need to use the binding redirect tag and specify the version we want to use in the new version property. I can say in the app config file we have assembly building this XML version v1. Similarly, I can say again we have a publish policy apply yes binding redirect old version this 1.1 to new version 1.000. So this is the like configuration in the app config file we are updating. Next question we have like reflection about. So what is a reflection and why we need it? So reflection is needed when you want to determine the content of an assembly. For example, like look your Visual Studio Editor IntelliSense. When you type dot, you can see like get uppercase, lowercase, get changes, get hash code, and like many objects you can see after click after like uh, type the dot symbol. So this is possible because of the reflection. So reflection also goes one step further. It can also invoke a member which is inspected. For instance, if the reflection detects that there is a method called get changes in an object, we can get a reference to that method instance and invoke the same on the routine. So it is like very useful reflection in our programming. In simple words, reflection passes through the two step called inspect and invoke. Invoke process is like option, I can say. And for the implementation of reflection, how we can do? So implementing reflection in C# is like two-step process. First, get the type of the object and then use the type of browser. Browse means like method, property, etc. I can say I have a some example, like you can see I created one assembly variable. An assembly.load file is directly at DLL loaded, and after that I need that one. So using get property, I can say I apply a for each loop from this parameter type get members transfer into object member, then I write this object member file info name. I have to be browse that one, so again I apply the same loop, and for this time it is used for the get property, and this property will I including in the property info dot name. So in case you want to invoke the member which you have inspected, you can use the invoke member to invoke the method. And I can see this is the invoke member method we have, and I type this display and binding flag dot public. Similarly for the non-public and instance. Next question I have, like what are the practical uses of reflection? And practical wise, I can say if you are creating application like Visual Studio Editor where you want to show internal of an object by using the IntelliSense, that time you can use. In unit testing, sometime we need to invoke private method. So that's a different thing. Test private member are proper or not. That time we can use reflection. Sometime we would like to dump property method and assembly reference to a file or probably show it on a screen. So on that scenario, we can use the reflection. Next question I have, like what is the use of dynamic keyword? And in the programming language, it can be divided into two categories: strongly typed and dynamically typed. So strongly typed language are those where the check happen during the compile time, while dynamic language are those where type check are bypassed during the compile time. Bypass is a key difference between the strongly typed and dynamic type, I can say. In dynamic type, like language objects are known by only during runtime, and type check are activated only at the runtime. We have a two type: compile time, runtime. So when we have a compile time, it goes on the static to runtime, and only runtime we can check with the help of this dynamic keyword. So I would like to like take advantage of both the world, because many times we do not know object type until the code is executed. So in other words, we are looking to add something like that dynamically statically type kind of environment. So that's why dynamic keyword help us with to create the variable using the dynamic keyword. And if you try to see the member of that object, you will get the message like that I created the dynamic variable with the x and assign the value c sharp, and I just want to check the value of that. So x dot I can see dynamic expression I can type here, and it is like we are assigning the string type of value, and I want to increment. So what will happen? It give the error. So for that for that reason, how can we check? So this thing like comes under the dynamic. It is checking at the compile to runtime. So the advantage of using the dynamic keyword on this type of scenario. And practical uses of dynamic keyword, as I can say, like biggest practical uses of dynamic keyword is like when we operate an MS Office component via interop. So if you are accessing the Microsoft Excel component without dynamic keyword, you can see like how complicated the below code. You can see before the introduction of the dynamic keyword, it is like complex. We have to identify each and everything by large, and after the introduction of dynamic keyword, we can check the data value at the dynamic word, the dynamic keyword at the compile time, and before executing the final, I can say, runtime. Then again, we have a question like, then what is the difference between the reflection and dynamic? Both reflection and dynamic are used when we want to operate an object during the runtime. Okay, so reflection is used to inspect the metadata of an object. It also has the ability to invoke the members of an object on runtime. So both are using on this scenario. Like dynamic keyword, when like practically we are using, so I can say it is introduced in the .NET 4.0, and it evaluate object call during the runtime. So until the method call or meets compiler is at least bother if those method property it is exist or not. And dynamic uses the reflection internally, I can say it caches the method call meet, thus improving the performance to certain extent. So reflection can invoke both public and private member of an object, while dynamic can only invoke one of the public member. As you can see, we have difference over there. I just created one table, reflection and dynamic, and inspect the metadata in the reflection, yes, but in the dynamic don't. We don't have option on that. And invoke public member in the reflection, yes, but dynamic also yes. And invoke private member in the reflection, yes, but dynamic no. Catching is applicable reflection no, but in the dynamic yes. So this is the key difference while using the reflection and dynamic keywords. So below are the, I can say this is a simple diagram and what reflection can do and what dynamic keyword can do. Inspect to invoke applicable in the reflection, and this only invoking is the comes under the dynamic. And most of the time you also heard about the like what is the method overloading, method overriding, or early binding or late binding, compile time or runtime. So these statement are the same, but they are asking in a different manner. So sometimes the candidate get confused. So I can say all this. I can say the keyword I mentioned. It is the same answer we have. So early binding I can say it target the method, property, and function are detected at the checking during the compile time. So if the method, function, or property does not exist as a data type issue, then the compiler throw an exception during the compile time. But in the late binding, opposite of early binding. So like we are checking at the compile time, but late binding is goes under the runtime. We are checking the same thing at the runtime and throwing the exception over there. Then again we have a question like what is the difference between the where and dynamic keyword? Where is also a early binding like compile time, and dynamic is a late binding runtime. So where keyword look like at your right hand side, like you can see I given the example here. So it is like doing the compile time checking. So it decide the left hand side data type. In other words, where keyword just save your typing a lot of things. Like I can say variable X I declare and given the value as a data type, I can say string type of value. So it decide every time X will be holding the value as a string type. And on the other hand, I can say in the dynamic keyword, with the dynamic keyword, I can say dynamic declare the variable z, and I can check the value like length on that, like z dot length. So it will be catching over the runtime. So if some reason you mistype the length property, so now in the next part, I will discuss about the C# interview question, and let's start on that. So the next question we can say we have like where is and to length smaller, you would end up the runtime exception. So you will getting the error. And next question I have like what is the term type, I can say safety and casting in C sharp. So these are the two types of language in which type safe and one which is not. So type safe means like preventing type error. Type error occur when data types of one type is assigned to other type unknowingly and it get undesirable results. So for instance, a JavaScript is not a type safe language because I can given the example here below. You can see the Boolean code num is a numeric variable and a string is a string. So JavaScript allow me to num plus string. Now guess, will it arithmetic or concatenate? If I just combine num and string with the same var keyword, so what it will do? Because one type I assign the numeric, one type I assign the string. So what it will concatenate or it will add. So this is the happening because JavaScript is not type-safe language and it allows to set one type of data to other type without restriction. So C# is a type-safe language and it does not allow one data type to be assigned to another data type. So this below code I can say not allow the plus operator and on the different data types. Next question we have like again for the explaining the casting, implicit conversion, and explicit conversion. So to understand the implicit and explicit conversion of data type, first let's try to understand type casting concept. What is that? First we have to understand what is the casting concept. So type casting is a mechanism where we convert one type of data to other type, int type to string type or string type to int type, I can say. So for example, I have this example int I equal to 100, then I created again double d variable data type and assign the zero value. So when we try to move double data type to integer data type, casting occur. Casting is also termed as a conversion, I can say. basic simple words. So in the above example, you can see this I and D value. There is a no loss of data because when we move 100 integer value to double, we get the 100 value as it is. So this is termed as an implicit conversion and casting. So now consider the below code as we are trying to move a double to an integer. Like in this scenario, I can say integer only have 100 will be received, decimal will be removed. So you can see I need to explicitly specify what we need to convert into an integer. So this term is known as a explicit conversion. So you can see double D 100.23, then int I equal to 0. Then again I assign like int type of thing I need from this decimal value 100.23. I did only 100. So I have to decide create it like int, then again variable D value. So we have 100 and we truncate the 0.23 value over there. Again, I have a question like what are the stack and heap, this type of question, and what you are given, like you heard about this thing in the college book like DSA concept, and C# also we are using the same thing. Stack and heap are the memory types, and in an application, and stack memory store the data type like int, double, boolean, etc, and heap store the data type like string and object. So for instance, when I have this example, when we run the first two variable I and y, it is stored in the stack, but at the last variable o is, you can see it is stored in the heap. So this is the like storing the memory, I can say, using. Then next I have this question like what are the value type and reference type. Value type contain actual data while reference type contain the pointer, and the pointer point to the actual data. So value type are stored on the stack again, and while reference type are stored on the heap. And the heap, I can say like we are using the class and creating the object over there, and that object instance also stored in the heap. Next question I have like what is the concept of boxing and unboxing again, and when we know like what is the value type, what is the reference type, then we have to pick conversion, I can say. So when value type is moved to the reference type, it is called as a boxing, and when we are trying to referencing converting or moving reference type to value type, it is known as the unboxing. So example, you can see I have int I equal to 1 and object obj I created is equal to I. So I just int value to reference type, I just converted, so it is comes under the boxing. And again int type to object type or reference type value type to reference type, so it is like unboxing. Then if we are using the boxing and unboxing, then we have to know like what is the performance over there. So how performance is affected due to the boxing and unboxing, this type of question when they are asked, so we have to give the answer like when boxing and unboxing happen, the data need to be jumped from stack memory to heap and vice versa, heap to stack. So which is a bit of memory intensive process. As a good practice, avoid boxing and unboxing wherever possible. It's like very rare case, if you need then you can do this type of conversion, otherwise please try to ignore, please try to like keep prevent, I can say, don't every time frequently you can use this boxing unboxing concept. And then we have like very, then how can we avoid the boxing and unboxing, then it is like difficult to avoid the boxing and unboxing, but yeah, for instance most of the time you will moving the data from UI object like text box to business object, and also vice versa, so which will demand boxing and unboxing. So first thing, it is like really necessary to use the boxing and unboxing if it is like unavoidable, like moving data from UI text to normal internal C# data type, then it have to go for it. And if you can use, try to use some like generic list, array list concept to avoid it. Next we question have like if we have a class reference value type, then where is the value type stored? As I mentioned previously, also value type is stored in a heap. A static variable, then question have stored in a heap or stack, then static variable even if it is a value type, it is stored in the heap. I have next question like how to prevent my .NET DLL to the decompile. So by design .NET embed, it is like rich metadata inside to executable code using the MSIF. So anyone can easily decompile your DLL back using the tool like Idealism. So it is like owned by the Microsoft and Reflector for the .NET, which is the third party. So secondly, there is a many third party tools which make this decompiling process a click away. So anyone can easily look into your assembly and reverse the engineer then back to the actual source code and understand the some real good logic. So which is can make easy to crack your application. So this process by which you can stop this reverse engineering is using the obvious fiction, and it is a technique which will be like foiler decompiler. I can say many third parties like Xenocode, Daemon, and are for .NET provider, and .NET function solution is like we are using to prevent for this decompile. So Microsoft include one, and that is a dot Foster Community Edition with the Visual Studio .NET. Then next question I have like what is the difference between the convert dot to string and dot to string method. So just I given the example here. I have int I equal to 0, this variable I created, and when we are converting this I integer value to I dot to string or convert dot to string. So what is the difference? So the basic difference I can say is the convert function handle the null, while I dot to string does not handle the null. So it will throw a null reference exception error. So it has a good coding practice. Using the convert is always safe. So basically we are using for capturing or handling the nulls while using the convert dot to value. Then again we have a question like what is the difference between the string versus string. The aliases I can say small s and capital S, and the string is like capital S is aliases and of small string. So technically both below are code statement. You can see capital S C sharp this question, and again string small s same question. So the difference I can say it is aliases object string bold byte. This is the like data type which is aliases for this one. Next question I have like so when both mean the same, like why they are different. So when we talk about like two different things, one there is a .NET framework and other there is a .NET language. So which use that framework. So I can see language and framework system dot string like capital S is a .NET framework data type, while small string is a like data type. You can see this is our tree diagram or architecture. I can say I assign here. Then we have a question like then when to use a small string, when to use a capital string. This avoid the confusion one of them consistently I can say, but from the best practice perspective you have to do the variable declaration, and it is good to use a small string. And when you are using it is a class name, then like when we are preferring to create the class, so it is like preferable to go with the capital S prefer. So I can see a small string variable string dot to upper. I can say this capital S is referred here as a class, so that's why I use the capital one, but here I created a variable name and I use as a small s. Okay, so this is the major and most important question, like how we are handling the exception in the .NET. And exception are handled in the in the .NET. I can say with the system dot exception base class. And if you want to raise an error from the source, you need to create the exception and object with the below code snip. So this throw new exception is a customer, like this is the word. This is the throw new exception we are using to fetching out, or I can say printing out our error over there. I can say I just given the example here with the help of try catch block. You can try you can write your logic here, and if any error is happening, this will comes under the catch exception, and with the help of this exception e object variable you can print what is the error or what is the message you are getting for applying that logic. Then I have a question like then how can I know from which source the exception occur. Then it is like we have system dot exception stack trace allow you to identify series of call which lead to this exception. Like in the .NET Visual Studio, if you are compiling, you are getting the proper pop-up block which you can see with the stack trace, and you will identify this is the error is happening over there. Full detail. And next question we have like what if we do not catch the exception. Then if you do not catch the error, .NET framework will handle the same, and you will get a message box. In I can say if you feel or if you're like every time you are using or compiling, I think you 100% got this type of pop-up message, and handle exception. This type of like pop-up you are getting. So it is like given by the .NET framework. Otherwise, if you are already given the proper message in the exception object variable, you can also return that. Then again we have a exception. Then there is a like variation, system level exception and application level exception. So exceptions that are thrown by the .NET framework are called as system exception, and these error are non-recoverable. or fatal error like argument out of range exception, index out of range exception, stack overflow exception, etc. But application exception are custom exception like created for the application, and application exception are created by the deriving from application exception class. I have this example also, and you can then create the object of this below exception and throw the same from the code and